والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وأشرف المرسلين صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Please recite Durood Sharif. اللهم صل على سيدنا وشفيئنا وحبيبنا وبارك وسلم صلاة وسلاما عليك يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Okay, so let me clear first. This is second round for these groups. Okay, they are winner for yesterday, but they are once again playing today as a second round. Okay, so don't think why we are standing once again, right? So this is, yeah, you have one more chance, right? And then there will be another session too. That would be last final session. Okay, yeah, bismillah. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so first question is, what is Kalimah Tamjeed?
So yang kalimat tamjid subhanallahi walhamdulillahi wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim.
MashaAllah, good, right answer. When someone is sneezing, just listen question, okay, first, and then reply. When someone is sneezing and you are listening, what you supposed to say?
Yarhamakallah.
Great, right answer, MashaAllah. You are going to do something, right? But you are not sure it's happening or not. But you are having intention to do that. What you supposed to say at that time?
Inshallah.
Great, right answer. You are going to enter to your house. There is dua to say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What is another dua to say? You are entering to your house. There is one dua, everyone knows that, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What is another dua?
Allahumma inni as'aluka ghayr al-mawlidi wa ghayr al-mahraji.
Once again, please.
Allahumma inni as'aluka ghayr al-mawlidi wa ghayr al-mahraji. Bismillahi walajna wa bismillahi gharajna. Allahi rabbina tawakkalna.
Yeah, what? Wow is missing. Once again, please.
Allahumma inni as'aluka ghayr al-mawlidi wa ghayr al-mahraji. Bismillahi walajna wa bismillahi gharajna. Allahi rabbina tawakkalna.
MashaAllah, right answer. Who is the, one question, okay? Who is the first and who is the last messenger of Allah Almighty? Okay, who is the first and who is the last prophet of Allah Ta'ala?
Hazrat Adam alayhi salam and Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
MashaAllah, right answer. The name of our prophet is Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. What does this word Muhammad mean? Okay, this question is actually out of your syllabus, so it's it will be removed from your question and answer sheet. Okay. Next question. What are the name of 4 Imam we believe in? $30. 25. 10. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. Wrong. Who is the family of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? They are called Ahle Bayt.
Muhammad Mustafa, Bibi
Sallallahu
Fatima,
alaihi wasallam.
Bibi Fatima, Hazrat Ali al-Murtaza, Imam Hassan radiallahu anhu, and Imam Hussein radiallahu anhu.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Good job. This one. What was the year when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away from this world? Year. Okay. 30. 25. 15. Shh, nobody will tell. Keep quiet. 10. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. How many surahs are in Quran?
114 surahs.
MashaAllah. Last question for you guys. ये सब नहीं है ना? What is the 4th salah we read in whole day and night timing? What is the name of 4th salah? $40. Okay.
Maghrib.
Right.
Okay, so you're too wrong in right. Okay, sit down. Who's against him? Alia and Nasir.
Oh, okay, first question for you. Before you start, once you have replied, it's none. Okay, so make sure you can discuss and then after that you can tell. First question is, what is dua when you are leaving the mosque?
Allahumma inni as'aluka min fadlika.
Great, right answer. You are replying by Yarhamukallah? When you are replying by Yarhamukallah? Did you get the answer? Question? Question is, we sometimes reply by saying Yarhamukallah. What time we say Yarhamukallah?
When someone sneezes,
MashaAllah. Right answer. MashaAllah. Chahrul Kalima.
John Kalima, Tawheed Sabha. No.
Yeah. Okay. Count down. 30. 25 seconds. 25. 15. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One wrong answer. Recite Suratul Lahab.
تبت يدا أبي لهب وتب ما أغنى عنه ماله وما كسب سيصلى نارا ذات لهب وامرأته حمالة الحطب في جيدها حبل من مسد.
MashaAllah. Right answer. Suratul Nas.
قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر وسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس.
MashaAllah. Just count any 3 Wali Allah, friends of Allah.
Gospel Hajj Sheikh Abdul Talib Jilani Manoladen Kushti and Dada Kunjban.
Sorry?
Gospel Hajj Sheikh Abdul Talib Jilani Manoladen Kushti and Dada Kunjban.
Talk clearly, loud and clear. Make closer. Yes.
Gospel Hajj Sheikh Abdul Talib Jilani
Abdul
Kadir
Oh, look,
Jilani Manoladen Kushti and Dada Kunjban.
Okay, right.
अच्छा राइट आंसर लुकनत है मैं सोच रहा हूँ अब्दुल तालिब करी ओके माशाल्लाह राइट आंसर कैन यू प्लीज जस्ट टेल अस द नेम ऑफ 4 imams.
Imam Safi, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Hanbal and Imam Malik.
This is 5.
No.
Shh. Who said?
Imam Safi, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Hanbal and Imam Malik.
Great. Good answer. Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam's mother name is Sayyida Amina. What is his foster mother's name?
Sayyida Halima Radhiyallahu anha.
Great. MashaAllah. उसी में देखें इधर उधर करके पूछ भी नहीं बहुत ज़्यादा हो जाएगा तो फिर The last messenger of Allah is Sayyidina Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is the first messenger on the earth, and his wife.
Sayyida Abdul Radhiyallahu anha.
Wrong. There are 114 surah in Holy Quran. How many chapter Quran has?
30 chapters.
MashaAllah.
Tie break. Okay, so it start. So you stay there. Okay, start. Stay there. What are the names of the other famous prophets and the name of the holy books which Almighty Allah revealed upon them?
The Quran on Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, Injil on Hazrat Dawood alayhi salam,
Injil on
Injil on Hazrat Dawood alayhi salam.
Okay, wrong answer. Name of the 3 holy nights and Islamic month in which they come.
Badr,
Wrong answer. Name of the Ahl Bayt.
Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Bibi Fatima radhiyallahu anha, Hazrat Ali al-Muttasa radhiyallahu anhu, Imam Hussein radhiyallahu anha, and Imam Hussein radhiyallahu anha. Who?
Can you repeat the answer, please?
Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Bibi Fatima radhiyallahu anha, Hazrat Ali al-Muttasa radhiyallahu anhu, Imam Hussein radhiyallahu anhu, Imam Hussein radhiyallahu anhu.
Okay, right answer. Dua to coming out from the toilet. Washroom.
غفرانك الحمد لله الذي أصحب أن الله وفاني.
MashaAllah. 1 minute. Patch. 1. Okay. Dua when you waking up.
الحمد لله الذي أحيانا بعد ما أماتنا وإليه النشور.
Okay, so 3 right, 2 wrong. Okay, Aksa, please come forward. Aksa team. Go. Ready? Okay. What is the name of the cave where the first revelation come out to our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and what was it?
Cave of Hira, Ikra Bismi Rabbika Allazi Khalaq.
What is the sana? Recite the sana.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وتبارك اسمك وتعالى جدك ولا إله غيرك.
MashaAllah.
MashaAllah.
What is the meaning of second kalima?
I bear witness that there is no Lord except Allah, and I bear witness that Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a messenger and servant of Allah.
Right.
The 3 holy nights in the Islam, name of the 3 holy nights and which month it came.
Shab Qadr, 27th Ramadan, Shab Miraj, 15th Shaban, Shab Miraj, 27th Rajab.
MashaAllah.
Yeah, they are winner.
Okay, so you are the winner. Okay, you already gave 4 answers, right? So you came in the final. Okay, sit down. MashaAllah, very good job. Okay, so now we start again with the Aman and what is name? No, where is the paper gone? The first round paper. Okay, Anika and Alisa, right? Anika and Alisa. Go ahead, please. लिख दे नाम लिख दे यार ये छोड़ दो वो लिख दिया आपने जो विनर है उसको लिखा इसका खुलासा रखेंगे राइट डाउन हुज विनर राइट डाउन ये 8 में से 2 निकली फिर 2 में से 1 ये जीतेंगे ना वो लोग जीतेंगे ओके सो Anika and Arisa, right? Okay, right down Arisa in the Hibza. So ready? So you have 45 seconds to reply the answer. Once when you reply once and that's it. That will be a final answer. So before you reply, just think and discuss if you want to, okay? Okay? Biju Biju, yeah. Okay. So which day, date and Islamic month was our beloved Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alaihi wasallam born on the earth?
Monday, 12th Rabiul Awal, 570 AD.
MashaAllah, very good. What are the names of famous prophets and the names of the holy books which Almighty Allah revealed upon them?
Tawrat on Hajrat Musa alayhi salam, Injil on Hajrat Isa alayhi salam, Zabur on Hajrat Dawud alayhi salam.
MashaAllah.
Right answer.
Name of the three Wali Allah, the friends of Allah.
Gosbak Hajrat Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jalani, Kawaja Mudin Christian Dr. Ganat Prakash.
MashaAllah.
Who was the first woman to accept the Islam?
Hajrat Khadija radhiyallahu anha.
MashaAllah. Who was the first man and woman Almighty Allah sent on the earth?
Hajrat Adam alayhi salam and Bibi Hawa radhiyallahu anha.
MashaAllah. Right answer.
What is the name of our Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's grandfather?
Hazrat Abdul Muttalib.
Okay, right answer. What is the name of the first wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and what was her age when she married to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Hajrat Khadija radhiyallahu anha. She was 40 years old.
MashaAllah, very good. MashaAllah, very good, very good. So what are the names of the four Imams?
Imam Shafi, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Hanbal, Imam Malik.
MashaAllah. What is the name of our holy book and how many surah and chapter are in it?
Holy Quran, there are 30 chapters and 114 surahs.
MashaAllah. Last question. Okay. Who take care of our holy Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam when his mother died and what is his name?
His grandfather, Sayyidina Abdul Muttalib radhiyallahu anhu.
MashaAllah. So you are 10 of 10. MashaAllah. Very good. Sit down. So the next group is Hifza and not Moin, Aman. So Aman ready? Hifza ready? Okay.
You can
Little bit come
closer.
closer so you can discuss. Okay. Name of the 12 Islamic month.
Muharram, Safar, Rabiul Awwal, Rabiul Thani, Jumadal Awwal, Jumadal Thani, Rajab, Shaban, Ramadan, Shawwal, Zilhajj, Chilhajj.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah, MashaAllah. No? Yes,
Can you repeat please?
Muharram, Safar, Rabiul Awwal, Rabiul Thani, Jumadal Awwal, Jumadal Thani, Rajab, Shaban, Ramadan, Shawwal.
Okay, wrong answer. Can you go ahead one more?
Yes, listen carefully, yeah. Go ahead, forget.
Muharram, Safar, Rabiul Awwal, Rabiul Thani, Jumadal Awwal, Jumadal Thani, Rajab, Shaban, Ramadan, Shawwal, Dhul-Hajj, and Zilhajj.
Okay, mashallah, very good. Okay, so name of the 3 battles in which our beloved Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alaihi wasallam took part.
Battle of Badr, Battle of Badr, Battle of
You can discuss.
Battle of Badr, Battle of Ahad, Battle of Qadr.
Again.
Battle of Badr, Battle of Ahad, Battle of Qadr.
Beta, last one. What is the last one? Battle of?
Qadr.
Battle of Badr, Battle of Uhud, and
Battle of Qadr.
Battle of?
Qadr.
Loudly, but I don't understand.
Battle of Qadr.
Battle of Badr, Battle of Uhud, and?
Battle of Qadr.
Yeah.
One तक. Okay. वो उसका भी problem है. Okay. Okay. Name of the three holy nights of Islamic month in which they come. Put your mic.
Shab-e Qadr, 27th Ramadan, Shab-e Miraj, 15th Shaban, and Shab-e Miraj, 27th Rajab.
Yeah. Right. Huh? No. Can you please just again repeat it?
Shab-e Qadr, 27th Ramadan,
Once again.
Shab-e Qadr,
Mic in front of your mouth, please.
Shab-e Qadr, 27th Ramadan, Shab-e Miraj, 15th Shaban.
Okay, wrong.
Yeah, it's wrong. Yeah.
Okay, wrong answer, beta. So you have one wrong answer and they have 10 right answers, so they won against you. Okay. So now, okay, sit down, please. Good effort. Okay. Okay, now with the win group 1. Win 1 is who is win 1? Take it out. Win 1 here. Okay, group 1 is Hamish T and Muhammad Madni. Come forward, please.
One and fourth, right? Okay, so this is second round, you know better, right? Muhammad and Hamid, right? This is second round.
Yeah.
So don't feel like why we are standing again and again. So this is another round you are playing. Inshallah, if you go third round, you will be, inshallah, winner. Okay, so this will be kind of like same question, but in another way. Okay? Ready? Okay, first question. Name 3 holy nights and Islamic month in which they come.
Shab-e Qadr, 27th Ramadan, Shab-e Miraj, 15th Shaban, Shab-e Miraj, 27th Rajab.
Yeah, beta, just say it clean and clear. If you are, listen, just say it clean and clear, okay? If you are making any mistake in date, that would be marked as wrong answer, okay?
Shab-e Qadr, 27th Ramadan, Shab-e Miraj, 15th Shaban, Shab-e Miraj, 27th Rajab.
You said Shab-e Miraj twice. Wrong answer. What are the name of the 4 imams?
Imam Shafi, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Hanbal and Imam Malik.
Yeah. Right. When we entering to house, we have 2 dua. One is Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What is the another dua?
اللهم إني أسألك خير المولج وخير المخرج بسم الله ولجنا وبسم الله خرجنا وعلى الله ربنا توكلنا.
Right, mashallah. Recite Suratul Lahab.
تبت يدا أبي لهب وتب ما أغنى عنه ماله وما كسب سيصلى ناره ذات لهب وامرأته حمالة الحطب في جيدها حبل من مسد.
MashaAllah, right answer. Kalimah Tawheed, Chaharum Kalima.
جارم كلمة لا إله
Chaharum
جارم كلمة توحيد لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول لا شريك له وأشهد أن
Wrong. Who is the first prophet and his wife, those who were sent on the earth?
Prophet Muhammad Mustafa.
Wrong. Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala anhu is known as first Mu'min or first Muslim in Islam. Who is the first lady to accept Islam?
Hazrat Khadija radiyallahu anha.
Again please.
Hazrat Khadija radiyallahu anha.
Right. Question. What is the color of Holy Kaaba Sharif?
Black.
MashaAllah, right. Recite Suratul Falaq.
قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد. قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد.
Wrong beta. Because bata. You you can check with APA, right? What is mistake you have done? Last here. Okay, last question. Recite third kalima with meaning.
Glory to be Allah and all praise.
I said recite third kalima with meaning. Recite soem kalima with meaning.
Soyam kalimatam jid subhanallahi walhamdulillahi wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-azim.
Illa billah.
Illa billah al-aliyyil azim.
Come together, come closer and together. You can discuss in this. Say beta.
Soyam kalimatam jid subhanallahi walhamdulillahi wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim.
No. You can try once again. Last chance.
Subhanallahi wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-aliyyil azim.
Right. Yeah. Meaning.
Glory to be Allah and all praise be to Allah. There is none worthy of worship besides Allah, and Allah is the greatest. There is no power and might except Allah, and Allah and the Most High, the Great.
Yes, right. MashaAllah. Okay, you have done 4 mistake and 6 right. You can go. Who is next group? Anika and Arisha something. Okay. First question. You know, this is second round. So if you are to discuss, you can. Once you did answer, that would be final answer. Okay. So you can discuss, and when you are saying, say with confidence. Okay. Yes. The question is, first question. Recite Soyam Kalima with meaning.
Soyam kalima tamjid subhanallahi walhamdulillahi wa la ilaha illallah wa la akbar wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. Glory to be Allah and all praise be to Allah. There is none worthy of worship besides Allah. Allah is the greatest, the Most High, the Great.
No. You can try once again. Translation.
Glory to be Allah and all praise be to Allah. There is none worthy of worship besides Allah. Allah is the greatest. There is no power besides Allah, the Most High, the Great.
Again, please, because just make your mic close to your mouth, please, so that we can listen carefully. Yeah, say it again.
Glory to be Allah and all praise be to Allah. There is none worthy of worship besides Allah. Allah is the greatest. There is no power or might besides Allah, the Most High, the Great.
Yeah, right. Okay. Recite Suratul Nas.
قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس
Again, please.
قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس.
You are having some mistake, beta. And you can check with Apa what is that mistake in surah. This is wrong. Dua before starting journey with car.
Subhanallazi sakkara lana haza wa ma kunna lahul muqrinin wa inna ilayhi li rabbina limunqalibun.
Again, please.
Subhanallazi sakkara lana haza wa ma kunna lahul muqrinin wa ma kunna
Right, wrong. Okay. Name the 3 holy nights and Islamic month in which they come.
Shab-e Qadr 27 Ramadan, Shab-e Barat 15th Shaban, Shab-e Maraj 27 Rajab.
Yes, right answer. Recite Sana.
Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika wa tabarakasmuka wa ta'ala jadduka la ilaha ghairak.
MashaAllah, right answer. What is the name of our holy prophet's foster mother?
Sayyidina Halima radiyallahu anha.
MashaAllah. Okay, name 4 Imams.
Imam Shafi, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Hanbal, Imam Malik.
MashaAllah, right. कितना हुआ? 3 है और
6 इनके साथ सही हो गए तो कितने सही हो गए? 6 हाँ 2 सही होते हैं. सीन पूछ सीन
Which day, date in Islamic month? Just carefully, listen carefully, okay? Which day, date in Islamic month did our beloved Prophet pass away from this world? You're supposed to say date, day, and Islamic month with year.
Monday, 12th Rabiul Awwal, 633 AD.
MashaAllah, right answer. क्या पूछ लें इनका कितना राइट है नहीं मीनिंग सब में नहीं है ओके लिसन केयरफुली we have 2 dua when entering the house. One is assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What is another dua for entering to the house?
Allahumma inni as'aluka khairal maulaji wa khairal makraji wa bismillahi warajna wa bismillahi karajna Wallahi Rabbina tawakkalna.
MashaAllah, right answer. Yeah. Okay, MashaAllah, you are winner now. Okay, you can go sit down. दूसरा और कहाँ है? सेकंड राउंड का विनर ये है जाकिर भाई।
हाँ तो उनको बुला लो वो फाइनल वो लास्ट में है तो वो और वो अक्सा वाला को चलो बुला लो अक्सा एंड नूर फॉरवर्ड अक्सा एंड नूर चलो लेट्स स्टार्ट So this is the final. So whoever win, that team will get the prize. Okay. So this is the final. So you against the Arisha and the Anika, right? The name I'm always confusing. Okay. Final નું છે ને આમાં જો ફાઇનલ નું હશે બનાવેલું જુઓ ને ફાઇનલ કા બનાવ્યો કદે Okay, the other group please come forward to the second group.
Mike.
Try not to make any mistakes.
Next class is class number 4. Okay, get ready for your competition. This is final round for them.
Okay, so first Aksa and Noor. Aksa and Noor.
Dua before starting a journey with car.
سبحان الذي سخر لنا هذا وما كنا له المقرمين وإنا إلى ربنا لمنقلبون.
Wrong answer. You can check with Appa what was wrong in this. No. Shh. Nobody will talk. Please just keep quiet. They have practiced hadith, Appa? No? What are the 5 pillars of Islam?
Shahada, Salah, Saum, Zakat and Hajj.
Right. Soem kalima with English meaning.
Soyam kalima tamjid subhanallahi walhamdulillahi wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. Glory to be Allah and all praise be to Allah. There is none worthy of worship besides Allah. Allah is the greatest. There is no power and might except from Allah, the Most High, the Great.
Right. Sifati imani mufassal.
Amantu billahi wa malaikatihi wa kutubihi ورسله واليوم الآخر والقدر خيره وشره من الله تعالى والبعث بعد الموت.
माशाल्लाह, right answer. जुनेद भाई कुछ बताएं, क्या पूछे? हाँ? ये बहुत हार्ड हो जाएगा इनके लिए. Okay, listen carefully. What was the first creation of Allah Almighty? Listen. And who was first to stand on the earth? What is the first creation of Allah, and who is the first man sent on the earth?
The Nur of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Hazrat Adam alayhi.
Who said? Somebody told. I said nobody will talk. Why don't you understand? Okay, right answer. Recite Surah An-Nasr.
إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفره إنه كان توابا.
MashaAllah, right answer. कहाँ गई कुल किताबियों कुल ख़त्म हो गई. क्लास 4 की है ये. There is dua when you enter the mosque. What is dua when you leave mosque?
Allahumma inni as'aluka min fadlik.
Right. Class 2. Name Ahl Bayt.
Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Bibi Fatima radiyallahu anha, Hazrat Ali al-Murtaza radiyallahu anhu, Imam Hassan radiyallahu anhu, and Imam Hussein radiyallahu anhu.
Yeah, right. What are the name of the four Imams?
Imam Safi, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Hanbal, and Imam Malik.
Yeah, right. Last question. Recite Kalimah Tawheed.
So I am Kalima Tawheed, La ilaha.
I said Kalimah Tawheed. Shh. Keep quiet.
Fourth Kalima Tawheed, La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa lahul hamdu yuhyi wa yumitu biyadihi
Wrong.
al-khayr.
Yeah, you got 8 out of 10. Yeah, give mic to them. Question. Name the friends of Allah. Any three.
Qais Pak, Hajat Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jalani, Kawaja Mudin Chisti, Tata Kanaj Baka.
Right. Name Ahl Bayt.
Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Bibi Fatima Radhiyallahu Anha, Al-Haja Ali Murtaza Radhiyallahu Anhu, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussain.
MashaAllah. Right. What was the first revelation and where was that?
Cave of Hira, Ikra Bismi Rabbika Lazi Kalak.
MashaAllah. Right. Dua when you leave in the toilet.
Gufranak Alhamdulillahi Lazi Azhaba Anil Azza.
You have second 30.
Ameen.
You can discuss.
Gufranak Alhamdulillahi Lazi Ahya. Gufranak Alhamdulillahi Lazi Azhaba Anil Azza.
5 seconds left.
Ameen.
No. Wrong answer. There was some material by which Allah Almighty has created Adam alayhi salam. What is the name of those materials?
Clay, soil, and water.
MashaAllah, right. What are 3 holy cities called?
Makkah Makarama, Madinatul Manawwara, Baitul Maqdas.
Baitul?
Maqdas.
Okay. Right answer. When you finish eating, what dua we have to say? Actually, let me say, this is Baitul Muqaddas and Baitul Maqdas. Both are the same word. Same thing is known by 2 words, Muqaddas and Maqdas, right? So, if you are saying Muqaddas or Maqdas, both are right. Okay? Yeah. So, next question is, when you finish eating, what dua you have to say? Dua after you finish eating. You have 40 seconds. 30. Yeah, you can think. We have 20 seconds. 15. Shh, guys, keep quiet, please.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's it.
Yeah, wrong.
So,
Okay. Recite second kalima with meaning.
Second kalimat syahadat, asyhadu la ilaha illallah وحده لا شريك له له الملك
You can discuss.
وأشهد أن محمد Dalam kalimat syahadat asyhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la syarika lahu wa asyhadu anna abduhu wa rasuluhu
Wa ashhadu anna.
wa asyhadu anna
Wrong.
So you lose the prize, contest because you have 3 wrong, they have 2 wrong. So Aksa and Aksa, right?
Yeah, Aqsa and.
No. So you will get the prize on the second, okay? Okay? MashaAllah. What do you mean no? You lost. Okay, so we start with class 4. So there is a paper for class 4. So class 3 is finished. Arishapa, great job done, okay? It was great. It's amazing. Okay, MashaAllah, and Sister Farida with a good help. Your assistant. MashaAllah, very good job. Excellent. Impressive. Okay, class 4 का निकाले paper.
Okay, class 4. Yeah.
So वहाँ पे उसका उनके पेपर वगैरह उनकी टीम बनाई हुई है. तो ये क्लास 3 का एक साथ करते पहले क्लास 3 का एक साथ करते. So class 4 come forward. I'll just put the names, so just sit here so we don't have to. Aisha Mariam, Fatima Patel, Rayan Patel, Amina Chaudhary, Amrin Sheikh, Sania, Adnan Hassan, Hajra Patel, Rehan Popat, Ali Abdul Muhammad, Zahir bin Qadzi and Muhammad Faiz Buda. Everybody come forward please. Now उनका पेपर बनाया हुआ है देखें आप प्लीज. वहाँ पे क्लास 4 का पूरा एक ये है. ये क्लास 3 का पहले सब साइड पे करते हैं. 15 क्वेश्चन पूरे साइड पे करते हैं. सिर्फ टाई ब्रेक यहाँ पे रहने हैं. आपने कल दिया था पूरा पेपर यहाँ पे रखा हुआ है. 25 क्वेश्चन ये है ना ग्रुप 1 ग्रुप निकाल लाए. Okay, so first group is Aisha Mariam and Adnan Hassan. Where is Aisha and Adnan? Go together. And for against them is Sania and Muhammad Faiz Buda. So go. Everybody else sit down. Only 4 people stood up. Okay, Aisha, this is your team, right? Okay, Sania, come here this way. Okay, you come here. So we start with Sania and Faiz, okay? And then we'll ask you. Here.
Yes, so you know the rule, right? Just think, you can discuss with your group member. Once you said the answer, that answer will be final answer, okay? So make sure you are discussing before you replying, okay? And then don't be nervous. Okay, just think. You can discuss with your friend and then you get replied, okay? Yes. So first one is.
Okay, so. Okay, I'm starting, okay? Ready? So 45 seconds to reply the answer. Once you reply and that's it, okay? We were a little bit soft with class 3 because they still not that much big boys and girls. But for you guys, we're gonna be very strict with the rules and regulations. So when you speak once and that's it done, okay? So before you reply, you think, okay? So when did the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's grandfather die?
When the Holy Prophet ﷺ was 8 years old.
MashaAllah, very good. What is the meaning of Muhammad?
The meaning of Muhammad is the praiseworthy one.
Okay. How many sons and daughters did the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam have?
The Holy Prophet ﷺ had 2 sons and 4 daughters.
Okay. What happened at the cave of Hira?
At the cave of Hira, At the cave of Hira, Angel Jibreel brought the message of Allah to the Holy Prophet ﷺ.
MashaAllah, very good. How many verses were revealed in the first revelation of Holy Quran?
5 verses were revealed.
Okay. What building did the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the companion, make in the Medina?
Masjid Nabawi.
MashaAllah. What title were given to Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by the people of Makkah?
Sadiq and Amin.
Okay. So next question, what is the Sadiq and what is the meaning of Sadiq and what is the meaning of Amin?
Sadiq means true and Amin means honest.
Good. So who took care of Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam after his grandfather's death?
His uncle Abu Talib.
Last question.
So, how old was the Holy Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam when he migrated to Medina Sharif?
He was 53 years old.
Okay, good. Okay, so you have all 10 right answer. Now pass on to the Aisha and Adnan Hassan. So before you reply, Aisha, I know you are, don't be rushed, okay? Adnan, okay, you have 45 seconds to answer, not a 5 seconds, 45 seconds, okay? Okay, so when did the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mother pass away?
When our Holy Prophet ﷺ was 6 years old.
Right answer. What was the message the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was spreading?
There is no God other than Allah, and Hadrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his last messenger.
MashaAllah. When and where did the first revelation of the Holy Quran happen?
At the cave of Hira when our Holy Prophet ﷺ was 40 years old.
MashaAllah. When did the Holy Prophet ﷺ's father pass away?
The Holy Prophet's father passed away when 6 months before the Holy Prophet's birth.
MashaAllah, very good. Right answer. On which day when our Prophet ﷺ passed away from this earth?
Our Holy Prophet ﷺ passed away in Medina.
Wrong answer. I said day and date, right? Wrong answer. Done. Okay, so you lose already. They have 10 right and 1 wrong, so you lose. Okay, sit down. So next group. Wing. What is the group? Fatima Patel, Hajra Patel. आपके क्लास में ना हाजरा नहीं आई है तो क्या करेंगे? Fatima, you okay with alone or you want partner? Who else is not here today with that group? Okay, Amrin Sheikh and Jahin Kazi is here and Rehan, Ali Abdo. Okay, so you wait, maybe time is up then tomorrow or, okay, so wait with this group. Okay, sit down. So let's start with the other group. Rayan Patel and Rehan Popat. And Amina C and Ali Abdoyan. Put your paper down, Rehan. Let's go. Okay, come over, Ali, come, and who is your partner? Amina Chaudhary, right? मैंने यहाँ पे ही पढ़ा है हाँ उसमें तो सिर्फ 15 क्वेश्चन थे तो 10 में से एक नहीं करे 10 में से 5 डिफरेंट होते हैं बाकी तो 5 तो सेम ही है क्लास तो वही मैं बता रहा हूँ of that question? इसमें 25. आपा वो डे पूछा था, which day? और डे, हाँ डे और डे, तो उसने क्या जवाब दिया? मदीना.
Right, so up day or day yeah, day or day.
अरे मौत साहब, लेकिन अगर उसने वो मंदिर भी बोला होता तो चलो मान लेते, उसने सीधा मदीना बोल दिया. इसमें तो एक नहीं होगा क्योंकि ये 25 क्वेश्चन और सिर्फ 10 क्वेश्चन.
नहीं मैं डे और डेट आप दोनों मिला अभी जो है ये 25 में से आप पूछें
तो बोलने का तो बोलते कि मंदिर, तो वो
No.
सीधा मदीना बोल दिया.
क्वेश्चन जो है बिल्कुल डे और उसके बाद डेट भी आप डे और डेट जो है दोनों
Let's start. So ऐसा हो तो मार्कर लिखो यहाँ पे, ऐसे ये करते रहो, नहीं हाईलाइट करते रहो किसको कौन सा पूछा, क्योंकि ये रिपीट नहीं हो रहा है. What did the angel Jibril? Okay, so Ryan, who has mic? Ryan, right? Okay, put your mic on the yes. Okay, what did the angel Jibril say to Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
He asked him to read.
Right answer. How old was the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he migrated to Medina?
He was 53 years old.
Okay. What is the name of our Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and its meaning?
Praiseworthy one. Praiseworthy one.
What is his name? Done. Okay. How many sons and daughters did the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam have?
2 sons and 4 daughters.
लेकिन ये तो What was the message the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was spreading?
There is no God other than Allah, and Muhammad is his last messenger.
Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When did the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's grandfather die?
When the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was 8 years old.
When and where did the first revelation of the Holy Quran happen?
At the cave of Hira, when the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was 40 years old.
What titles were given to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by the people of Makkah?
Sadiq and Amin.
इनको ये पूछना है, ये पूछना है। When did the Holy Prophet ﷺ's father pass away?
6 months before the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's birth.
When and where was the Holy Prophet ﷺ was born?
He was born in Makkah on 12 Rabiul Awwal.
Okay. So 9 right, 1 wrong. Okay. So next group is Ali. Get the mic. Ready? Put your mic. Good. What happened at the cave of Hira?
Angel Jibril asked the Holy Prophet to read.
So that's the wrong answer, right? I said what happened at the cave of Hira and then you did the wrong answer, okay? अब देखो कहाँ देखते हैं मैं How many verses were revealed in the first revelation of the Holy Quran?
5 verses were revealed.
Okay, right answer. What is the meaning of Sadiq and Amin?
Sadiq means true and Amin means honest.
When did the Holy Prophet ﷺ's grandfather die?
When the Holy Prophet was 8 years old.
Right. What is the name of Holy Prophet ﷺ's mother?
Our Holy Prophet ﷺ's mother's name is Hazrat Amina.
What was the message the Holy Prophet ﷺ was spreading?
There is no God but Allah and Hajjah Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the last messenger. There is no God but Allah and Hajjah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the last messenger.
Okay. What is the name of Holy Prophet ﷺ's father?
Hazrat Abu Muttalib.
Wrong answer. Muttalib. Okay, so you lost against the Rehan and Rayyan. Okay, because they have 1 wrong, you already gave 2 wrong. So, okay, it's Hazrat Abdullah. Okay, so next group. ના બીજું છે ને 6 ગ્રુપ છે તો હા ના 3 જીતેલા બાર આવશે. Oh, this is the last. Okay, Fatima, we don't have your partner, so it's unfortunate, but you have to go for the competition, okay? If you want, you will get both card, $50, okay? Go ahead. Fatima and Hajra Patel and Amreen and Jahin Kagzi. Jahin तो बहुत होशियार है. क्या हुआ? ले पूछे. Fatima, ready, beta? Okay. Okay. Who take care of our Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam after his grandfather's death?
His uncle Abu Talib.
How old was the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he got married?
He was 25 years old.
Right answer. What happened at the cave of Hira?
In Angel Jibreel brought a message from Allah. Angel Jibreel brought a message of Allah to our holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Right answer. How old was the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he migrated to Medina?
He was 53 years old.
When and where did the first revelation of the Holy Quran happen?
At the cave of Hira when our holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was 50 years old. 40 years old.
But the wrong answer. When you said first, that's the first time is the, so he was 40 years old, but you got the wrong answer, okay? What title were given to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by the people of Makkah?
The titles were Sadiq and Amin.
Good. What is the meaning of Sadiq and Amin?
Sadiq means true and Amin means honest.
When did the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's grandfather die?
When our holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was 8 years old.
Good. When and where was the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam born?
Our holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born in Makkah on the 12th Rabi al-Awwal.
Good. Last night. What is the meaning of Muhammad?
Muhammad means praiseworthy one.
Okay. So you have 9 right, 1 wrong, okay? Give it to them. Yeah. Ready, Kadzi? When did the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's father pass away?
6 months before our holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's birth.
MashaAllah. Who did the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam marry?
Hazrat Khadija radiyallahu anha.
What building did the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions make in the Medina?
Masjid Nabawi.
Good. What is the name of our Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
What happened at the cave of Hira?
Angel Jibreel brought the message of Allah to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
What was the message the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was spreading?
That there is no God other than Allah and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the last messenger.
Good. What happened at the cave of Hira?
Angel Jibreel alayhi salam brought the message from Allah to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Wrong answer, beta. He asked to come out. मेरा phone बज रहा था. ये नहीं. What happened? What is? ये पूछा आपने? इनको पूछा? नहीं हुआ ना? What is the meaning of Sadiq and Amin?
Sadiq means true and Amin means honest.
How many verses were revealed in the first revelation of the Holy Quran?
5 verses were revealed.
हैं? ओके, ये पूछा इनको, ये नहीं पूछा ना। When did the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's mother pass?
When the Holy Prophet ﷺ was 6 years old.
Okay. So you have tie. So we're gonna start with the tie break question. Okay. So you keep 5. So 5 pillars of Islam and meaning of zakat.
Shahadat, Salah, Som, Zakah, Hajj. Zakah means charity. Zakah means is one of the 5 pillars.
MashaAllah, very good. Name of 12th month of Islam.
Muharram, Safar, Rabi al-Awwal, Rabi al-Thani, Jama'at al-Ula, Jama'at al-Thani, Rajab Shaban, Ramadan, Zilqad, Zilhajj,
6, 5.
Muharram, Safar, Rabi al-Awwal, Rabi al-Thani, Jama'at al-Awwal, Jama'at al-Thani, Rajab, Shaban, Ramadan, Zilqad, Zilhajj.
Wrong answer. So name of the 4 imams. यहाँ पे ये करेक्ट करने तो गलती हो गई। Nine, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Name of the Ahle Bayt. वो तो होशियार लड़की, लेकिन वो इसको लास्ट ईयर नहीं थी ना। इसमें 3 ग्रुप जीतेंगे, तो उसके लिए ऐसा करना पड़ेगा, तीनों को 5 क्वेश्चन एक साथ खड़े करके पूछना है। जो 2 चाहे वो कर देना, नहीं टाई नहीं करें उसमें, तो क्या करें, तीनों को 5-5 करें, उसमें से जो 2 टीम सबसे ज़्यादा जवाब दें उसमें से पहले करवाएं, उसमें से जो हारेगा वो तीसरे के साथ जाएगा, उसको एक बार और चांस मिलेगा। 10 seconds. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What is the name of foster mother of our Holy Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alaihi wasallam?
Hazrat Halima radiallahu anha.
Okay, so you have 2 right, 3 wrong. The next group, Fatima, go forward please. So give me the 4 imams name.
Imam Shafi, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Hanbal, and Imam Malik.
MashaAllah. Okay. So give me the 3 holy night of Islam and which month they came. In which month they came? Yeah. Name of the 3 holy nights and Islamic month each in which they come.
Can you repeat?
Name of the 3 holy nights and Islamic month in which they come. Eight, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What was Allah's first creation?
The nur of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Okay. Name of the 3 Wali Allah, the friends of Allah.
Any 3 wali Allah, friends of Allah.
Gosh Bagh, Hazrat Sheikh.
Loudly, beta.
13 seconds. Say anything if you want. 8 seconds.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Last question, okay?
If you give this answer right, you won, okay? Oh, 2 right, right? So he will, if she will give right answer, right? Yeah. बोलिए मुझसे कौन सा कुछ 5 prophets name पूछना. Give 5 prophets name. Any 5 prophets name.
Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam, Hazrat Adam alayhi salam, and our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam.
MashaAllah. So you won this one against them, okay? So you have 3 right and they have 2 right, so you won. Okay, good. Sit down. So हमारे सब ये 3 ग्रुप जीते हैं, तो उसमें ऐसा करते हैं कि 5-5 सबको पूछ लेते हैं. जो 2 ग्रुप सबसे ज़्यादा सही जवाब देगा उसको मतलब पहले खिलाएंगे, और जो उसमें हारेगा वो हारा हुआ ग्रुप तीसरे ग्रुप से 10 मिनट में हो जाएगा. एक ग्रुप तो हो जाएगा, समझे मेरी बात को? समझे? लेकिन मैं आपको समझा देता हूँ. हाँ, 5-5 करना खड़े कर देते हैं. ग्रुप 1 है, 2 है, 3 है, राइट? तो उसमें सबको 5-5 सवाल जवाब पूछना है. इसमें से जो भी ज़्यादा अच्छा तो वो 2 ग्रुप पहले खेलेंगे, मान लो खेले. उसमें से जो जीता वो फाइनल में चला गया, जो हारा वो इसके साथ खेलेगा, लूजर के साथ. और जो उसमें से जो जीता फिर वो फाइनल में जाएगा. सही है? सही? ओके. तो win 1 win 3 साल हो गया. win 1 win 3. Sania and Muhammad Faizpura against Fatima. And the third group, where is the third group? Rayyan and Rayyan, right? No, yeah. Okay, come on. So I'll come forward. All 3 groups. We give you the scenario what's going on right now. Come all 3. So we're gonna ask all 3 groups 5 questions first. So who the maximum answer given, you know, the right answer, correct answer given by any 2 groups, they're gonna compete each against, and whoever lose from there, they will compete to the third group. Okay? Right? Okay. कोई भी 5 question पूछो. भारती पूछो ना ये પછી competition में जाओ. Okay, so Sania, first you, right? Okay. So, who was the first man and woman sent by Allah Almighty to the earth, and by like how they made from?
Hazrat Adam alayhi salam and Hazrat Bibi Hawa radallahu anha, and they were made out of clay, soil and water.
Okay. Okay, good. What titles were given to Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by people of Makkah, and what are the meanings of them?
Sadiq and Amin. Sadiq means true and Amin means honest.
Good. What is the name of the cave where the first revelation came of the holy book, and on that book how many chapters and surah are there?
Cave of Hira. Bismi Rabbi Kalak Lati Kalak.
Wrong answer. Okay, one wrong. What are the names of the other famous prophets and the name of the holy books which Almighty Allah revealed upon them?
Can you repeat?
What are the names of the other famous prophets and the name of the holy books which Almighty Allah revealed upon them?
Held 10 seconds. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 1.
Okay. Name of the 3 holy nights and Islamic month in which they come.
Could you please repeat?
Name of the 3 holy nights and Islamic month in which they come.
Seconds. 7 seconds. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Name of the 3, oh, you have 5 done. Okay, so you have 2 right, 3 wrong. Okay, give it to Fatima. Okay, Fatima, same question for you. What are the names of the other famous prophets and the name of the holy books which Almighty Allah revealed upon them? બીજા પૂછીશું એવું તો ટફ ના એટલે સેમ ના ના પેલા લોકોને નહીં આવે ને
30 seconds.
આપણે શું કરવાના હતા એ લોકોની ગેરતૈયારી કયો ને
15 seconds.
થઈ જશે વાંધો આજે એક પ્રોસેસ તો કરી જાય ને આપણો. ઓકે. Name of the 3 battles in which our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam took a part.
Battle of Badr, Battle of Uhud, and Battle of Khandaq.
Okay, good answer. પૂછ્યું તો આ નથી પૂછ્યું નેમ ઓફ 3 નાઇટ્સનું નથી પૂછ્યું ને એને નથી પૂછ્યું એને રાતનું પૂછ્યું ને ये लोग तो अबू के लोगों करे ना या ये करते हैं ना ये बुक ठीक हाँ क्या when looking in the mirror dua looking in the mirror
اللهم أنت حسنت خلقي فحسن خلقي.
पूछा आयतुल कुर्सी तो pray आयतुल कुर्सी
الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض ما ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسي السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم.
Surah Al-Falaq.
قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر نفاسات في العقد.
Wrong answer. Okay, you done with 5, so you have 3 right and 2 wrong. Okay, Ryan. Give me the name of 4 Imams.
Imam Shafi, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Hanbal and Imam Malik.
MashaAllah. Good. Okay. कहाँ क्या वो क्वेश्चन सबको नहीं आता है उसको भी वही पूछा. What are the name of other famous prophets and the name of the holy books which Almighty Allah revealed upon them? इसमें से आपको 2 आंसर उनके 3 आंसर 30 सेकंड तो आपको पता 1 2 3 ऐसा बता ए आयशा नो बेटा
20 seconds.
you can tell
Guys, keep quiet. Nobody will talk.
okay 4 3 2 1 okay so name of the 3 holy nights and Islamic month in which they come. You don't know? So pass? Done? Or you want time? Okay. 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Give me the 5 prophets' name.
Hazrat Adam alayhi salam, Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam, Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
MashaAllah, very good. बस हैं बोल कौन सी सूरत है सूरतुल फील
Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil alam yaj'al kaydahum fi tadlil wa arsala alayhim tayran ababil tarmihim bi jaratin min sijil faja'alahum kasfin ma'kul.
Okay, mashallah. So you have 3 right answer, 2 wrong. So you and Fatima, your group and Fatima will be tomorrow again, and then whoever lost from there, they will fight against Tanya and the other group. Okay. Okay, so tomorrow inshallah, today we didn't brought anything, but tomorrow the chicken sandwich we will brought for you guys, okay?